During Hitler's rise to power, there was a group that played an extremely significant and brutal part in his rise to the position of Führer. The SA were integral to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, and their violent antics would be pivotal in establishing Nazi rule over Germany. In this video, we'll look at who were the SA, who were their key leaders and individuals, the history of the group, and much more. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Firstly, let's look at what SA actually means. It stands for Sturmabteilung, which in German means storm detachment. The foundation of the SA actually predates the formation of the Nazi Party, interestingly, and it was an older establishment. When World War I came to a conclusion in 1918 and Germany surrendered, there were a number of independent paramilitary groups or units that plagued the defeated country. These were known as the Freikorps and were made up of prominently First World War veterans who had returned from combat. The Freikorps fought against communism and other groups that they believed were to blame for the German defeat of the conflict. The groups were very popular, with an estimated 400,000 men involved in their paramilitary activity by 1921. One of these was known as the Turn- und Sportabteilung, or the Gymnastics and Sport Division, based in Bavaria. This would later be rebranded into the Sturmabteilung or SA. The SA would become deeply entrenched and associated with the German Workers' Party, which also saw a rebrand into the more historically notorious Nazi Party under the leadership of Hitler. At the time, speaking in public about politics was a rather dangerous thing to do in Germany, so the original task of the SA was to protect their prized asset Adolf Hitler, as such speeches and gatherings would often attract communists, the SA's enemies, and would result in ferocious brawls and violence. This would play into Hitler's hands, as the members of the SA were made up mostly of old military, who certainly knew how to handle themselves, and they knew how to deal with these events when it kicked off. When fights would break out, the police under the Weimar government were usually unable to cope and were powerless, and it would be the SA who would restore law and order. This would give Hitler vital ammunition in his speeches, claiming that the Weimar government lacked leadership and power to govern the country effectively, saying he was the one person who could restore Germany to greatness and control law and order. Funnily enough, it would be the members of the SA who were frequently breaking the law, however their power on the streets was huge. They seemed to get their own way, and under the leadership of their charismatic speaker, the SA looked like an attractive proposition to many people in Germany. In August 1921, the Nazi Party newspaper, Der Volkische Beobachter, called for young men to join the SA, declaring them to join the fight against the foreign races that were intent on destroying Germany. In March 1923, interestingly, Hermann Göring would become the leader of the SA, which at this point had around 3,000 members in and around the Munich area. Göring would later be appointed to the position of an SA Gruppenführer and would maintain this until officially the end of the Second World War. As mentioned earlier, one of the key parts of the SA's responsibility was the organising of Nazi events. One of their first activities was the Munich Beer Hall Putsch, which took place on November 8, 1923. The putsch was a failed coup in which Hitler tried to seize control of the Bavarian government. During the putsch, 2,000 members of the Nazi Party were marching to the Feldherrnhalle in the city centre when they were confronted by the police. This resulted in the deaths of 16 Nazi Party members and 4 police officers. Hitler would be wounded in the clashes, as would Göring, and although a failure, this brought Hitler to the attention of the Germans and the worldwide press. Adolf Hitler had now become a name people had known about. After this, Hitler was leniently imprisoned in Landsberg prison, where he went to work on Mein Kampf. However, the German government would ban any Nazi Party organisations, activities, and this would lead to the formal dissolution of the SA. Whilst Hitler was in prison, the SA was reorganised into a group called the Front Bahn. Whilst the Führer was in prison, Ernst Rome, an early Nazi Party member, had been given the authority to rebuild the SA. Rome would continue to organise paramilitary groups and attempted to join multiple sympathetic groups together from across Germany within the Front Bahn. This would be unpopular with the Führer, however Rome would later go on to be the leader of the SA in 1931. Following Hitler's release from jail, the SA would be formally re-established in February 1925, and in 1926, 6,000 stormtroopers or SA would participate in a Nazi Party rally. By 1930, the group were gaining huge numbers, with the membership swelling to around 60,000. Following the catastrophic events of the Great Depression, with the effects being felt harshly in Germany, anger grew, and in 1932 there were well over 400,000 members, and when Hitler was in power, the number would grow to 4 million. As the SA's numbers grew, the organisation continued to embrace violence, and their legacy would be remembered for this. Members would aggressively interfere with meetings of political parties or groups who opposed their beliefs. They would raid these meetings, fight with other paramilitaries, influence elections to a huge degree by intimidation, and would also go on to intimidate groups such as Jews, Roma Gypsies and Communists. They believed these people were the enemies of Germany, and they would be extremely violent and brutal towards them. In March 1933, members of the SA would ransack the local offices of Social Democrats, and one Social Democrat was beaten to death. Also, another incident involved 8 SA members shooting an ex-band leader of a communist music group. Ernst Rome's leadership, however, led to the group to become much better organised. His plan was for the SA to absorb and replace the German military once Hitler became in power, but Rome had a flaw. His devotion was purely to the Nazi ideology and cause, rather than a personal veneration towards the Führer. When Hitler became Chancellor in January 1933, the size and strength of the SA under the leadership of Rome became a huge problem for Hitler. He would find himself with a large group who were possibly more loyal to Rome than they would be to him. Also, the acts of brutality and violence carried out by the SA were an issue, and Hitler would want to distance himself from this and establish himself as a proper head of state when he got into that position. During 1 week, for example, the SA would have clashes with Social Democrats, which led to the deaths of 3 SA members, and in retaliation, the SA tortured more than 500 men, with 91 of these dying. The SA's ability to wield violence on a mass scale was terrifying, and Rome began to talk of a second revolution to go along with the Nazi one. This led Hitler to grow suspicious of Rome, and he deemed the SA at this point to be too powerful and as an internal threat to the Nazi party and himself. Rome would also go on to criticise Hitler in public, at one point accusing Hitler of being rotten and betraying the SA. This ultimately sealed his death warrant. In June 1934, the Night of the Long Knives occurred after being organised by Hitler and his top advisors. This was a huge purge of the SA that led to the massacre of many of its leaders, with many being shot by the newer organisation, the Heinrich Himmler-led SS. With this night, many of Hitler's other enemies were also murdered, and in particular, Ernst Rome was. During this purge, at least 85 members of the SA died, including their leader. However, it's been estimated that this figure could even be as high as 1,000. Hitler had got what he wanted. He had brutally suppressed the organisation and brought them into line, showcasing his supremacy and ultimate power. Following the Night of the Long Knives, the SA was in limbo. In 1935, a major reorganisation took place, and men aged between 18 and 35 were sent into service with the German military. The men of the SA, aged between 35 and 45, were placed into reserve, and those older were assigned to local militias. Hitler intended the 35 to 45-year-olds to help in maintaining public order in German towns. The SA would exist in some capacity up until May 1945, when Nazi Germany collapsed. The SA would be banned after the fall of Germany and at the end of the Second World War in Europe. However, interestingly, the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg found that the SA were not a criminal organisation. So today, the SA are most notably recognised in images and footage by their brown shirt uniform. However, they had a key role in the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Once the Führer, though, was in the position of power he greatly craved, he saw the potential of the SA as a tool for overthrowing him, and therefore plotted their downfall effectively by brutally purging them. They were a hugely important group in ascertaining power for Hitler, and were awfully brutal and intimidating to the local population, with their power being completely tied in with violence. We hope you've enjoyed this video. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching.